Hey, welcome to Our Defining Moments. I'm your host, Mary McClements. In this podcast, I talk with people about the split-second moments in their lives that sent them in directions that they never expected. From the woods of Vermont to the streets of San Francisco to the Camino de Santiago in Spain, you may be astonished by the chain reactions these moments have had not only for my guests, but for those around them. Today, I have the honor of meeting with Alexsys Thompson. Alexsys is the best-selling author of The Power of a Graceful Leader, featured by Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the best new leadership books in 2021. She's the creator of the Gratitude 540 journal series, which I have actually done, and it's amazing. Executive integration coach, founder of Ubuntu Living, Gene Keys Guide, and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Alexsys's work is guided by her life's mission to create safe space for souls to show up. Welcome, Alexsys.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. I am so appreciative that you are able to take the time today to speak with me and just feel so honored.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Well, thank you. So you were living in Texas for a while, and I don't know how long a while is, but you came back to Vermont. And this is how you and I met. Around the time that you came back to Vermont, you had messaged me or friended me on Facebook, and we had a short interaction via Messenger, and then we met up for coffee. And I was so impressed by your ability to not just reach out, but to start a really warm conversation, whether it be for networking or friendship or connecting with like-minded people. I don't know, but it was really refreshing. And so I want to thank you for that start off.
Yeah, it's been amazing, the journey over the past couple of years of getting to know you and who you are in the world. So I'm really glad I made the effort.
Oh, well, me too. Likewise, one of my first impressions of you was, whoa, she's a powerhouse. And I was a little intimidated. I was like, wow, I'm 6 feet tall and I think I'm pretty powerful, but I felt like, teeny compared to you. So it's really interesting kind of watching you maneuver through the world. So today you're going to share your defining moment, which was when you worked for Child Watch of North America. But before that, tell me some interesting things about you, your life, what you do.
Yeah. So it's always an interesting question because we answer with what we do, right?
Yeah,
like I do this and I do that. And I've really been working over the past decade of my life trying to figure out how to answer who I am versus what I do. And it's challenging. So who I am is someone who's committed to my own continued evolution as a human being and aligning more with values of love and joy in general in the world. And that's a challenge because that isn't necessarily always my orientation to the world.
Yeah. What is your orientation to the world?
Yeah. So from a young age, I have a deep sense of curiosity. So I was always looking at why did someone or something, a flower or a tree, why? Like, how did it get there? What makes it work? That kind of a thing. And that kind of orientation sometimes doesn't start from the wonder spot of the awesomeness of the thing, but rather, how do I dismantle it? How do I learn about it, right? It feels more entropy or destructive in orientation rather than standing there honoring that it's even there first and asking permission to engage in any kind of way with any type of being. And I've definitely grown into that in the past decade. It's taken a while.
You feel as though in the past where you're like, it feels kind of like aggressive in a way. And this what you're describing of being more curious feels softer.
Yes. And so a large part of that, as I've been doing a ton of learning and pretty much my whole life, but most recently this past decade, I'm beginning to understand the dynamics of the masculine and feminine energy that we all carry with us.
Yeah.
And understanding and giving myself grace around, I grew up in a time, in a place, in a man's world, not that men are good or bad, but that was the model I had. So the more feminine parts of my being couldn't find a home in that evolution of myself in the first iteration.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back to that now and it feels more like home. So,
I love that. I can so much relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the doing part of my world is I do executive coaching. I'm an author. I do conflict mitigation and senior leadership team dynamic work. So that's all the doing part. But underneath of it all is just the desire for my own life to live from a more love vibration and higher frequency. and bringing that into the work that I do so that the leaders that I have the privilege of working with and through can find their own way of being that in our world, and hopefully create and catalyze love in our corporate America structures.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I feel as though for decades, maybe centuries, there's been no room for that in leadership.
Yeah.
Millennial, it's yeah. And I would love to talk to you about this. So I have so many questions about that in and of itself, but another time. But yes, I love that you've kind of portrayed, looked at things in a more masculine way. And now, right, it's like, oh, we get to be soft and we get to be feminine or whatever it is, whatever woman, whatever that feels like to you, goddess is like, oh, what a gift. You get to actually come back and work at that. It's not like it's gone forever. So I love that. Thank you for sharing all that. And you said evolution in the beginning. And that's something that I just, seeing you on social media and in the world, I've often thought that you've created this like intentional evolution. And I'm so glad to hear that I was kind of right about that.
Yeah, no, spot on. Intentional being very key because I got tired of living a world by default.
Yeah. Oh,
and
good.
I once I could figure out who I needed and wanted to be in the world, I got very intentional about what I wanted to learn, who I wanted to hang out with, who my teachers were going to be. Yeah. Very
so
much
good.
So.
Good. Yeah. This is a whole other conversation that I would love to jump into with. So in 1998, and I think before that, you were working for Child Watch of North America on a case around a missing child with a connection to Vermont. And what I know of Child Watch is that it's an organization, and I stole this from the website, but it's dedicated to the prevention and recovery of missing, abused, and or exploited children.
Yes.
Whew, that's big work. That's big work.
It was very big work. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about Child Watch and your role that you had with them?
Sure. So I went through a divorce, which was the catalyst. That was not the defining moment we're talking about today, but it was a catalyst to how I got to Child Watch. And I was, as a young mom of a couple of 3 and a 4-year-old, I was trying to figure out how to create safety, right, for myself and them through a really tumultuous time in our lives. And that brought me to this organization. And I did it mostly for a part-time gig, unpaid. I was living in Vermont and Plattsburgh, New York, kind of both of those places during that time. And it ended up being from a part-time volunteer thing. Then it ended up being a part-time paid thing. And then eventually they just said, hey, we really like what you're doing. It was more like marketing and awareness, prevention work, which I felt very comfortable with, and raising funds and awareness. And then they just said, hey, we think you can do more. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And neither did they. Okay. Yeah. So this is back, we think about human trafficking and all of those things. And today it's a pretty prominent conversation.
Right.
But back in this time frame, it was a dirty little secret, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And a big fear, as should be for all of us. So I just grew inside the organization, and we had some missing children cases up here in New England and in Vermont specifically. And so now all of a sudden went from marketing awareness to being called by government officials and parents of missing children to get in the trenches and help figure out where's my child, of which I had no training other than I'm a mom and protective, just like most of us moms are.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
how I got person for the job.
Yeah, sure.
What an honor. What an honor that you were doing marketing, et cetera, awareness, and they came to you and said, hey, there's something more here and we want to figure it out with you. That's amazing. So talk a little bit more about like a day-to-day or a week-to-week piece of your job. I want a really clear picture of this. Yeah.
So it was more like I would have a relationship with an organization and they would commit to, like, we actually put out, I don't know if you remember this, back in pretty old fashioned now, but boxes where you dump your change into.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a day in the life for me would be the kids in the back seat and we would drive around and pick up the boxes.
Oh my gosh.
Put a new box. Literally, this is what we did. Take them home, dump it all on the floor. This is how the kids learned about money.
Oh my gosh.
And sort it all, roll it all, and then go deposit it in the bank. So that was like the mundane work. Then there was talking at organizational events, the Lions Club and Rotary Club, and just creating awareness.
Good.
And then eventually became getting in the trenches and being with parents that were literally living through the nightmare of not knowing where their child was. And some of those, they end up in various types of ways.
Right.
So that's really where I got introduced to trauma work and PTSD and some of that type of thing, both for myself, quite frankly, as well as for the family members that were going through this horrific event.
Yeah. Every parent's worst nightmare that your child is going to be missing or worse. Did your own kids at the time know your work, or were they just too young and they knew you were like, it was cool to dump all the coins in the backseat? Yeah,
they didn't have the fear factor. I mean, I suppose intuitively, now that I think about it, because it was inside me, I'm sure they picked up on it eventually at the end of that time of that organization. That was why I ended up leaving, because the fear was just getting bigger than the mission for me. Wow. But, it was balloons and parties. I mean, here in Vermont, I'll throw a name out because this is kind of fun. I developed a friendship with Jamie Lee Thurston, and he's kind of a big name around here for country music, right? And he had said to me one day, I want to sing the national anthem at an event. And I was going to Anaheim to work. We did a lot of baseball and raced NASCAR Country Star stuff for raising awareness and funds. And they said that they'd let him sing the national anthem in Anaheim.
Oh my gosh.
We flew there to do that together. So that was the type of stuff that I love doing. Okay, that's fun. You're playing with the stars, you're dressing up. So that was a lot of fun. The real work was sitting with families and sitting with law enforcement officers that didn't know what to do, because this isn't an everyday event in every town.
Right.
Certainly Vermont at the time wasn't.
And they may not really know how to deal with the emotional side of a family, or maybe they're not parents, or maybe, exactly.
And their own emotions, which was something that they didn't have. I found interesting. They didn't have a lot of place for their own emotions to go. Yeah. Many of them were fathers dealing with the what if it were me thing. And it was tough.
Yeah. And how interesting, if I can connect that back to the leadership piece that you do now. There wasn't and isn't a lot of room for emotion in these roles of leadership, in these roles where everyone thinks you're supposed to know what the hell's going on all the time. Fascinating. Oh, I love those connections. Thank you for sharing all that. And it leads to the defining moment that you're going to share with us. Feel free to jump right in.
So at this time, there was a mom of three that had her three girls went missing. And in this particular case, it was highly likely, as in most cases, but it was highly, highly likely that their dad had taken them. The dilemma here was he didn't go to the next town or the next state. He went from Vermont to Egypt with them.
Oh my gosh.
And so back then, and I did a little bit of study because I haven't looked into this in a lot of years, but back then, Egypt is politically, they're not aligned with the Hague Treaty, which that treaty just says, we honor your laws and you honor ours. Well, Egypt said, no, we don't care about yours and all the things, right?
Yeah.
Well, at the time, Leahy, who's still in the seat he's in, he was the ambassador to Egypt. So I got to know Lamise, which is the mom's name of the girls. And in our second meeting together, this is the defining moment. I still get the chills. I can still feel the pressure of this whole event. So we're at a coffee shop, right? And she reaches across the table and puts her hand on my hand. And I can feel the weight of her hand on my hand right now. And she just looks me straight in the eyes. And I'm a kid. I was in my 20s, and says, I know you're the one that's going to help me get these girls back.
Oh my God.
And I didn't have fear in that moment. The thing that happened that was so life altering for me was that I looked her back straight in the eyes, which, when you connect with someone there, there's nothing's hiding, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I go, yeah, we are going to do that. Because I could see the vision of her holding her girls again. Like it was just already done. Way before I understood time, space, manifestation, all before that. I could just picture it was done. And I was a vehicle that was going to be used to make that happen.
Wow.
So I remember walking out of there going, holy shit.
Yeah.
What did I just say? What did I just
something.
commit to?
Yeah.
I mean, because I just said I was committed to something that now my whole life, no matter how this ends, is committed to.
Yeah.
Because it has to have an end or I can't stop. Right. And if you know about missing children, many of them go unsolved.
Yes, I know.
So there's many parents walking the streets, looking at a person walking by, thinking, okay, my daughter will be 21. She looks 21. Could that be her? That's what most parents go through the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I just got into, but I was just going with it. It was really divinely led. It was not my human nature to take on that task.
Something moved you or gave you the confidence to say,
deeply.
we're going to do this.
We're going to do this. Yeah.
Wow.
And then we broke there and I went back and did a bunch of homework on things. I'm not politically inclined. I like to stay away from that. But in this point, I got very politically involved in Vermont because when I realized that Leahy had access to Egypt and we were dealing with Egypt, I was like, okay, what can we do? Right. Yeah. Jeffords and Leahy were in session then. And I remember reaching out as just a young girl in Vermont, trying to figure this out and saying,
so great.
You're about to write some billions of dollars over to Egypt. What if we tried this?
Oh my gosh.
What if we said, hey, there's some kids that we want back.
There's the powerhouse I know and love.
Yeah. And it took 9 months, but it worked.
Wow.
Jeffords took the petition to Congress. They took it to the floor. This is where I learned all my politics. It all got signed. So Leahy was able to take it up further and it happened. And all in between that time, I'm in Vermont at the time, but the company in the middle of that case moves me to Texas.
Oh,
so that's where the Texas thing comes in. Yeah.
So you were moved away from Lamise.
I did. Yeah. But we're like all the time on the phone. Yeah. We didn't have like FaceTime and stuff back then, but it was on the phone. We were in it together and it was really hard. And on a weekly basis, we would connect and mostly for her just to share how horrifying it was to just not know where her children are, not know where they are. Yeah. She thinks she knows who they're with, but that's not necessarily a good thing in this case.
Yeah.
And all of I'm a mom of 2 small kids, single parenting. I get it,
Yeah. So did it feel like there was a blending of lives, right, you get it, but I think if I can even slightly try to put myself in your shoes, I feel like her children would feel like my children, like that. Yeah. That intense, like we have got to we have to make sure they're okay and save them, well,
it's the truth because at this point, my kids, like I had pictures of them all around in my office and everything. And so I would tell them who they were and I would tell them what happened. I'd edit some because there's only so much a young person should have to handle, but they knew that what had happened and they knew that we didn't know what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah.
So we prayed a lot. I mean, that as a threesome, this is kind of where we started some of our rituals is that we prayed for those children and we prayed for that mom and we started to understand some of those things about how the world works. And this was a balancing act as a mom between moving from the fear, because now when you're living in that, in this case, back in the day, the demographic was white male. Every white male looks like a potential perpetrator, which of course is ludicrous. Yeah. But that's what happens when you're living inside something. And that became an unhealthy dynamic over time for me.
We're going to take a short break now to hear from our sponsor, Take Passage Coaching. This is still Mary, and I happen to be the owner and lead coach of Take Passage Coaching, and I'm thrilled I asked myself to be my own sponsor. Seriously though, Take Passage Coaching is a trauma-informed transformational coaching practice that supports people who are ready to move from uncertainty and doubt to the ability to clarify what they expect for themselves. At Take Passage Coaching, I work with clients to help them look at their negative thoughts not as the messy parts of themselves to stuff away, but how to use those thoughts as fuel. I know you've probably heard all the promises before, and you may have been working on your stuff for ages with not much progress. But one reason why Take Passage Coaching is different is that I celebrate all of your messy parts, the parts you're embarrassed about, the things you may consider weaknesses, and I help you to see them that they are all gifts and they are all strengths. So whether you're someone who has experienced trauma, and if you're human, you have, or are ready to do the scary things in life that you've been telling yourself you can't, Take Passage Coaching is ready to help you with the transition and change that you want. So go ahead and reach out to takepassagecoaching.com to book a free exploratory session and take good care. So going back to the moment when she reached out to your hand, you're in a coffee shop and it's you and her and Leahy, or?
Well, no, Leahy's not there. It's just her and I.
Okay.
And I have no idea how I'm going to make this happen. So all that homework comes after
I understand.
Saying we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to figure out how the hell we're going to do this.
Yeah. So, and tell me how old her kids were.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Math. I know. It's hard.
It's not just math, it's time.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing. Tried to go back and find some stuff in boxes to freshen up for this conversation. So I didn't find it all. So I want to say they were in the ranges of 4, 7, and 9.
Oh, babies.
Yeah. So they're very young, very young. Yeah.
And right. And who knows what they're being told. And
yeah. And I mean, in all candor, they had dual citizenship. So they could move through without any triggers or bells going off in any system, even if the system doesn't work, but if it did work.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of dynamics going there.
Yeah. So that moment, I'm just like, I keep picturing this moment when she reaches over and she puts the weight of her hand on yours. Who did that moment need you to be?
Yeah. A voice. And it's interesting for me to say that where I am right now, because I'm struggling with this voice again in my life. I find it goes in cycles. So it allowed me to be a voice for someone that needed a voice, not because they didn't have one, not because they weren't using it. They just needed more echo in the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that I have a big voice and I can energetically create things, attention and disruption, if chaos, if that's what's needed. And so it taught me the importance of a voice, and Margaret Mead from a young age was and still is a hero of mine. And that one, and I'm not going to get it right, but the whole quote around a small committed group of citizens making change.
Yes.
Lamise and I were 2 people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That then enlisted 2 more people, and they enlisted 2 more people.
Oh,
and that power of that was also very present in that moment for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if something unbeknownst to her, some other power made Lamise reach out to you. You know, if it was two-sided, one-sided, you know, because maybe if she hadn't put her hand on your hand, it wouldn't have been as powerful. But the physical touch
for me, it wouldn't have been. Yeah. Because there was an literal energy exchange in that. It wasn't just someone asking for help. Like you're sitting next to someone. When you're touching someone and you're exchanging energy like that, it's very intimate.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah. And intense.
The amount of chills I've been getting since we first started talking it's like I need to turn my fan off. Okay. So can you give us some good news, I hope?
Yeah. So 9 months later, which was really fast for a case like this, I got a note from Jefford's office that said, hey, we need you to fly up to Vermont. It looks like the kids are going to arrive home on such and such a date. And we really would like you to be there to greet them with Lamise. So of course, right?
Wow.
I'm on a plane. I come home and she's obviously first. She should be the first everything. And I'm just standing behind her, watching the very event that I saw in my eyes when she asked me for help unfolding in front of me. And this is another, it just, I just need a second here.
Yeah, I know.
It is really a powerful thing for human beings to live into something they know or something they see or something they feel is going to be something to transpire. And that was probably the second time in my life that I remember being inside a dream that I dreamt.
Oh, wow.
And that there's nothing more potent than that.
Yeah.
It's where you kind of, now with all of my studies, not then, but now, it's where you understand that time and space collapse. It's where you understand that we are all one being. It's where you understand the resonance of energy exchange. It's in that pinnacle moment. Yeah. And I've made up my whole life an example and an experience to have that experience many, many more times since then. It was a very anchoring moment for me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So are you at the airport when the kids come off the plane?
Yes. Yeah. In Vermont, they get off. They don't come in the building, right? They come off the plane. Yeah. And she's out on the runway. I mean, they couldn't barely get off the stairs. And
Oh my gosh. It
was pretty incredible.
Yeah. I'll really sink into that imagery later because I will start really crying if I do right now.
Because you're a mom. So if you just think about some of the best hugs you've exchanged with your children. Yeah. And just back yourself out of that thinking, what if I could never do that again? And then having that one more time at least. Yeah. That tells you everything. And I've done that many times with my kids from this point and several other cases that I had the opportunity to work with in after since this particular one that didn't turn out as lovely at all as this one did. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. I have to get my brain back onto the questioning side. Yeah, it's super powerful. And
So you'd mentioned this being your first trauma work, and maybe not your first trauma in life, but a significant time of experiencing trauma, working with people who like secondary trauma, and having worked pretty extensively with people who have experienced trauma in my victim advocacy work and at Take Passage coaching, as well as my own trauma, as well as my daughter's trauma. Trauma can show up in the oddest of places and in the most unpredictable ways. Have you kept in touch with Lamise, and do you know how she has dealt with that trauma?
I want to say 15 years ago, I tried to locate her, but I think that the underground system that she needed to enter into is working. So
that's great.
I just need to let that be because I almost have this weird feeling that if I could pierce that veil, someone else could pierce that veil. And I don't want that. I don't want to be a part of that. So I energetically have connected to her many times and feel resonance with her and deep, deep reverence and gratitude for the journey that she allowed me to take with her into some of her darkest moments. But I do not keep touch in the way that we would normally think of doing so.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe she wouldn't be able to connect in a way that you would hope for because of what she's experienced. And though a positive role in her life, you were involved in probably the most difficult part of her life.
Yeah. And I've thought about it because last night when I was prepping for this conversation, because I haven't really talked about this in years, I was so if that was in 98, that's a lot of years ago. So she might have grandchildren.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And when I thought about that, I was like, wow. And I thought about my kids and just, it all just started to come swimming back in with a lot of love and gratitude for the whole experience. So thank you for bringing it forward for me.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And if you feel comfortable talking about it, how have you dealt with your trauma around the situation over the years?
Yeah. So I've had to first I did traditional therapy, and part of it was around being in this incubator of humanity. You get a twisted sense of reality. And once I realized that mine was getting really twisted, like not everybody is a perpetrator. That's not true. And that I couldn't let my kids 4 feet out of my space. That was kind of when I said, okay, I need to call Dawn up, the owner. And I was like, I need to call it because this has become unhealthy for me psychologically. And it's definitely going to be unhealthy for these children. They need to be able to attach and create relationship. And I'm not going to allow that where I currently am.
Yeah.
So I went into therapy, traditional therapy, and that worked for quite a long time. And since then, I have found other modalities of energy work that have probably been more powerful. One, because I'm more available for the healing. And I continue to do the work, but this one is pretty well cleaned up, honored, grieved, and processed. This particular trauma is pretty well done.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's impressive. I mean, it's trauma. Trauma can be with many people their whole lives. And I don't think it ever goes away, right. but the fact that you can say, yep, I've really dealt with this and given it a lot of attention. And the fact that you say honor it is super powerful. And I love that you said that. I think that is the ultimate gift of the trauma, like what it taught you, how you had to move through it and how you dealt with it and how it applies or doesn't apply to your life now.
Well, I think it's true. And it goes back to the fear was bigger than the mission part is that I didn't have the orientation, the knowledge, or the skill set as a result to go ahead and be inside of, or even a recent other side of a trauma event and then ask what was in here for me. I didn't have that skill set. So now when I see trauma coming, because this, as you and I both do this work on the regular, you get pretty, here it comes. You sense it, you even smell it out before it's on the doorstep. But you don't resist it so much anymore because you understand, and this isn't to make it pleasant, or this isn't to say you deserved it. It's none of that craziness. What it is to say, this is here for me, not to me. And I can choose my orientation to this relationship of this event, this person, this thing, and come out of it in one way, or I can choose to resist it and do all the other things that I know weren't working for me and never come out of it, or come out of it more bitter, more angry, more whatevers. And I've had enough physical ailments out of doing that other one that didn't work very well that I know better now. So.
Yeah. So if I can kind of sum that up, I might say you get to choose how you feel.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who has been through either continuous or horrific or lifelong trauma or childhood trauma? What would you say to somebody if you or I were to say to somebody, well, you get to choose how you feel, which is it's true. And it's really, really difficult.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say to somebody who's like, you got to be kidding me?
Yeah. And I would say, feel that for right now. It's okay for you to be your crazy woman right now. And that's okay. Yeah. I mean, I remember being there when someone said stupid things like, felt like they were being insensitive. It felt like they were being dumb and in la la land, and certainly couldn't have been through a trauma like this, or they wouldn't have said something so stupid to me, right? But I get all that. Yeah. And all of that's okay to feel and process and move through. But I also, having lived through some similar events to yourself and having been in domestically abusive relationships, I also have come to understand that the sooner that I'm willing to see my part, and my part could just be that I'm staying. It doesn't mean that I asked for it. Yep. It could just be that I continue to stay there, whatever there is. But as soon as I can see that, then choice starts to enter the equation, where before it didn't feel like there was a choice.
Nice.
Right? And so once choice shows up, then you realize not choosing is choosing. Just as much as choosing is choosing. Yeah. And that whole experience of being able to shift yourself energetically, physically, financially, emotionally, all those things becomes available to you and online, where in the other space that you were prior to that, it just wasn't available. And that prior stuff it is part of the process. It's not like, I would never say to someone, you can just go from, being abused by whomever, and then the next day you wake up and go, boy, I was grateful for that. I'm out of there. Right. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So there's I don't want people to feel like I'm recommending that you downplay it or you don't understand the real event that is happening or has happened to you. And I've come to understand there's choice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. And thanks for that. I think some of the things, or one of the things I've said to a couple of my clients around trauma, is sometimes the best action is inaction and just being present with the shitty feelings that you're going through. And I think we tend to, those who have experienced trauma, sometimes, there's this fighting thing. There's this fighting power. I'm going to, whatever it might be, but it always feels like a fight. And how hard is it to just sit in the nasty juice? So, our defining moments, it's not just about how defining moments have affected us. It's how it has affected other people. How do you think your actions and what you did, the work you did with Lamise, affected others? Not just Lamise and her children, and not just you and your children, but how do you think it affected the larger world, your community?
Yeah. So that work led me to do more of that work. And when I got to Texas, there were multiple cases that I had the honor and just the honor to be leading and inside of, to start to create some judicial changes at the national level.
Right on.
I don't know if you've heard of Tim Ballard, but he's kind of like the center guy for all human trafficking. And so all of that early brick and mortar stuff that those of us were doing back in the 90s is set a foundation for him to do some amazing work right now.
Yeah.
And I don't take that lightly. I'm proud to have been part of that early onset, however small it may have been. The ability to be in Texas, another case that I worked on, the Trotter case, that was another defining moment where their daughter was found murdered. So that was a totally different outcome. So a totally different experience. It was we had state, federal, and other state and customs involved because of being in Texas. It was there was a whole nother thing. So right there in that moment, all of those authorities, right, all of those governmental agencies started to learn skills they didn't have that they could take forward with them in the next recovery and do better, be better. Yeah. And that's a huge ripple effect. And that, I love the question, because I think so often that when we're moving through our life, we either don't get the feedback that what we did mattered, or we play small to what we did being a matter, right?
Yeah.
And as I've done my own growth, I'm willing to own that I was a catalyst in a moment in time, like a stone in a pond kind of thing. And in there were some pretty significant ripples that catalyzed other people to do great work in that field. And for that, I feel very grateful. And I know it's changed a lot of other people's lives that I'll never even know.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that, the farther the ripples go out, the less likely you are to know them or to know how it has affected them. But there's so much power in that still.
Yeah.
So a little while ago, you had mentioned, it was just the two of us. And then we got two more people. And then we got two more people. And it sounds like that one of your takeaways might be that, the power of just starting with one, then two. What other takeaways do you have from this time?
So there was the voice thing, right? Lamise being willing to use her voice and ask for help. Me being willing to say yes. That's the other really big one is this practice that I have that I'm going to share with you didn't happen right then. But because of that work over multiple cases, this is a practice I have that I recommend to everybody. You can do this any way you want, but I have 2 months a year. May is my birthday month and October is my favorite month. Oh. So I picked those 2 months and whatever comes in that is asked of me. The first question I ask is it aligned with my values? And the second question is, do I have the resources, time, money, whatever's being asked? If the answers are yes, I don't even ask more details. I just say yes.
Nice.
And I let that whole experience just unfold. And I'm going to tell you, Mary, every time I've done that, the goodness, the inspiration, the relationships, the love, the innovation that have come into my life have been of such magnitude, I can't even explain it to you.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
And that's part of the intentional design of my life is that there's 2 months in the year where yes is just the answer. If those two things, it's aligned to my values and I have the resources, it's yes. And I've landed into some things that have been really wacko strange. A 10-day silent retreat without Ashante was a part of that.
Yeah.
That was another extremely defining moment in my life. And that's usually what comes out of those two. And the people that know me best are always like, oh, we're in a May month. Can't wait to see what comes from that. Or we're coming into October. And they're all like,
so exciting. Oh, I want to hear more. Yeah.
It is exciting.
My gosh, I love that.
Yeah. So the gift of saying yes to your life, I think is really the gift.
Well, and not just saying yes to your life, like, I'll go to Italy for the month. Well, maybe that is like super defining, but the fact that it has to do with alignment of your values and resources. And I mean, if someone says, hey, we need a volunteer to work for the Trump organization, clearly that doesn't line up with your values. Yeah. So the ability to say no, but mostly saying yes. I got to chew on this. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's so good. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. Well, any last departing wise words from one curly-haired gray woman to another?
I would say, I don't know if they're wise or not. And one of the things that I'm just playing with a lot lately is the word reverence. And to really, as I'm diving into that word, it's definitely colliding with my gratitude practice quite beautifully, as one might imagine. But to really ask yourself, where are you practicing reverence in your life? And then the question B is, are you putting time and resources to the right amount, whatever that may be for you in those areas? And for me, it's created clarity. Like where there was a lot of noise, there's no more noise.
Oh.
So that's been lovely.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, going from volunteering kind of part-time to doing some clerical work to kind of working part-time to reuniting children with their families. It's been quite a journey for you, and I can't wait to hear more. And I'm just so thankful that you shared this piece of you with us today.
Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for putting this podcast out there. I have a sneaking suspicion it will have its very own big ripple effect.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that would be lovely. It's about connecting people,
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your time, Alexsys.
You're welcome.
This has been Our Defining Moments with Mary McClements. I'm back next week with more stories of moments in time that changed someone's life forever. Please rate and review the show and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a defining moment and want to share, head over to the Our Defining Moment website at ourdefiningmoments.com and click on Share a Moment. I'm always interested in people's stories, and I may feature you on the podcast.